Okay, so today we're going to cover Twitter Bootstrap 4.0. Actually, Twitter Bootstrap is basically a bunch of CSS and JavaScript that have been compiled by people at Twitter. It's been very popular because basically it makes responsive design very easy. I think you know what responsive design is, but just in case you don't, it is when you go to any website like this one, and when you change and resize it, it actually does a good job of making the content smaller. For example, now you can see that there's a sidebar here. Whereas if you viewed it full screen on, it's just nothing to click on this side, right? So if you look at the same website on your mobile phone or your tablet or something, the same code, the same web page is generating all of those different views. Okay, and so this is a very important concept because mobile devices are more and more ubiquitous. When the web was first designed, it was pretty much only the desktop. Right, so people designed just for web pages, and they designed actually in certain cases for certain monitor sizes. So like 1280 by 1024, 1024 by 786. Those are very typical screen sizes that you've probably heard of that you have resolutions for, right? Okay, but when it came to mobile devices, things got a lot more difficult. In particular, when Apple introduced the iPhone with Retina, Retina basically doubled the pixel resolution. So when Retina first came out, I don't know if you ever had a phone that had Retina capabilities. You were looking at websites and they were like so tiny because actually they were using the same resolution to render things as on the big screens, which had much lower resolution. Okay, so basically, when when responsive design first started, it was actually pretty hard to do this. People would engineer different versions of each web page, okay, to be served to different clients, and everyone was struggling with this. So Twitter, actually, they came out with this solution and they open sourced it, and then everyone said, by golly gee whiz, we don't want to be developing all of this by ourselves. We would be rather using someone else's technology. So when they did that, a lot of people started using Bootstrap. Okay, so Bootstrap is really the most popular HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that's JS, framework for building a lot of these components. And if you look at the sheet that we have here, basically you're going to be able to do this. Okay, so what we're going to do is first look through the Bootstrap website. Okay, so there are currently 2 versions of Bootstrap. Right now we're looking at the version 4. So this is actually in alpha. Does everyone here know the difference between alpha, beta, and stable? Okay, so no one does? Okay. You've probably heard of beta before, right? What's beta mean? It means it's in testing. Okay, and it's somewhat stable. They believe people can use it. So you have like beta versions of games, beta versions of applications. You like early beta for Microsoft Windows. You can get access to a developer's copy in case you want to develop a new Windows software to be supported in Windows 11, for example. Okay, the stable version is the consumer version. That's the one that you go to the store and buy. So that comes after beta, after you've done the testing. Alpha's pre-testing. That means it's buggy. They know there are bugs to it, but they're going to release it anyways so that they can get feedback. Okay, so version 4 of Bootstrap has been out for a while. It's since last year, I think December or something of 2015, and now developers have a chance to work with this alpha version, and sooner or later they're going to change it into a beta version. That means they think it's stable. You're welcome to use it and welcome to develop around it, and you won't have any problems because things are more or less stable. When it's an alpha, it means that they might change things drastically. So what I'm going to teach you this afternoon, in 3 months' time, you might find that the syntax for some of the things have changed. Okay, but we want Orbital to teach you new technologies. That's why we're updating it for alpha version 4. Okay, so what is Bootstrap? As I said, it's basically to make your web pages look a little nicer than without it, and to make it responsive. Okay, so why don't we do this? We're going to go through the code that I've provided on GitHub. So if you go back to the document here, Okay, well, actually, some of this is inaccurate because I didn't finish this, so I'm going to get rid of these things. Okay, so what we want to do is download the Bootstrap code here. Okay, so you're going to click on this. It's going to bring you to the Git website. Okay, and I don't know whether you got to practice this much, but what you want to do is go over here, clone or download this repository. Okay, so you can either clone it or download it. If you download it, you just press there and download. Or if you know how to do cloning in GitHub, you would have to go to your terminal, something like this. Okay, and clone it. So I'm going to redo that again. So I would do something like git clone, something like this that you can see at the bottom. I don't know whether you can read it, so I'm going to make it a little bigger. Okay, like this, git clone, and then the clone URL, which you can get from here, right? So if you clone with SSH, you'll be able to do that. Okay, or you can just download the zip file. That's perfectly fine too. Okay, so why don't we all do that? I'm going to do that here too. Okay, so cloning gets you an exact copy of a repository that's up there on the web. So I've gotten my copy of the repository. It's located right here. It was actually the same one that I had created just now and deleted, so I can show you how to do the cloning. Okay, so with that, you've got two directories here which are important, one before and two after. You have the actual Bootstrap code, which I'm going to walk you through. Okay, and license and the README file. README file is in Markdown format, this format here, MD, which is another markup format. They just were trying to make it funny, so they called it Markdown instead of markup. Okay, but Markdown drives basically all of this code here. So if you look at this file in raw, it looks a little different than that, but this is basically what it looks like after it's rendered, after it's formatted. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do is go through all of these different parts. Okay. So let's go through the file tree here. Okay, we're going to go to let's see, Bootstrap first. Okay, so if you go into your Bootstrap directory, if you can follow that, okay, you'll see a license directory, license document, which just says that they're using the MIT license, which is an open source license that requires attribution. So if you're using Twitter Bootstrap, you have to include this license with the Bootstrap code. That's required. It's an attribution to say that you're welcome to use my source code, but you must embed this to say that it was not your original work. You're copying from someone else. You're basically citing them and saying, thank you for providing Twitter Bootstrap. We love you, etc. Put it up. You have to embed the whole distribution. So that's what I did here. Okay, I actually downloaded the code and then unzipped it, something like this. Okay. Okay, and then it created this directory over here. Okay. If you go into the directory, there are basically two directories inside of that, right? There's a CSS directory and a JavaScript directory. There's no HTML contents here, right? Basically, Bootstrap is a way to get your web pages looking in a certain way. Okay, so if you go into the CSS directory, hopefully you learned what is CSS. It's cascading style sheet. If you open up using your favorite editor or text editor or IDE, Bootstrap CSS, you'll see something like this, okay? Which are normal CSS directives, right? It says your HTML should have sans serif font and certain web adjustments for certain types of browsers. Your body should have a margin of 0, etc. Okay, now CSS, as you know, is quite human readable, right? Because you can go through this, and if you understand what it means, that's no problem. Okay, you'll see all of these things here. But it's also quite verbose, meaning it takes up a lot of space, right? So if you look at it, for example, if you look at the Bootstrap CSS, it's 115K of just style sheets. Okay, so what people typically do is they take the Bootstrap and they minify it. Okay, this file here is exactly the same as this file here. Okay, it's just obfuscated and made shorter. So if you look at this code, it's almost completely unreadable. Okay, so you have to go to the end. This is one line of that file, right? Basically, it says the same thing. All the spaces have been taken out. All of the identifiers have been made short. Okay, so this is just to make it much easier for your web browser to load because it's a much smaller file, but it's semantically, it's exactly the same as the one that's human readable. Okay, so when you hear about minification, okay, that's exactly what's going on. People are taking something that used to be human readable and compacting it, but making it semantically the same. It's not exactly the same as compressing a file using zip. Okay, it's just taking out all the spaces and extraneous white spaces and changing the identifiers to be shorter. Okay, so if you can see here, when you minify CSS, you shrunk about 20 kilobits of information. And imagine those are 20 kilobits that you have to load for every page on your website. If you're not caching, that's going to save a lot of bandwidth. Okay, when you save bandwidth, you save time for your users too. Okay, so that's a really good reason why we do that. Okay, if you go down and go back to the JS files, you'll see the same thing. There's a Bootstrap JS, which tells us the JavaScript that's going to be working with Bootstrap and a minified version of JS. Okay, we're not going to go through these files. I just wanted to mention what minification is. It doesn't mean running the file through min, but it means minimizing the project. Okay, so that's all good. Now we're going to go to the first directory before, okay, and we're going to take a look at index.html. Okay, so I'm going to be using my favorite browser, which is Emacs, but you have your own Vim, using Android Studio, whatever you want, you can look at this file. Okay. So this is a basic file. If you also open this in your browser, okay, I'll show you how to do it. If you're using Chrome, you add a new tab, okay, and let's see, I need to blow that up a little bit, and I'm going to open a file, right, this one over here, okay, open file, okay, and it's going to give me a file thing here, and I have to find where I downloaded that CSS file, okay, so here it is. I put it in this directory, git under my name and Orbital 16 and before. Come on, okay. And there's an index.html file here, okay? But wherever you downloaded it is fine, okay? So this is what that web page looks like when it is opened up in your browser, okay? All right, it actually is the same one that you'll find on the Bootstrap website. So if you go back to v4 alpha getbootstrap.com and you go to examples over here, okay, you'll see that there are a number of template HTML pages that you can play around with, okay? So I picked this one called Jumbotron because it has this big full width gray section called a Jumbotron that you see on many websites, It's basically like some type of splash page. Right? Okay, so I've clicked on this and then I get, well, look, it's exactly the same page, right? It's just that this is the version that's on the web, okay? And the version that you saw is here in my local directory, right? Which you just have on your desktop, okay? So depending on your operating system, you can open this file by doing what I just showed you using the file open, or you can double click on it if you have a Finder or a Windows Explorer tab or something, and hopefully your operating system knows how to open this up. Everyone got this page? This page. Okay, so I'll go around to help you in a minute, okay? All right. So basically, once you get this page up, you'll see this, okay? And we're going to take a look at the actual page itself, okay? So this is the page that we just opened. It's not too long, okay? Just a couple pages, okay? So I'm going to start at the top, okay? So you learned hopefully from Jai about HTML, right? HTML is the standard web markup for documents that you see that are rendered in a web browser. So this just tells you that it's an HTML page with language is English, and there's a head section. Here's the head section. Okay, the head section indicates metadata that's transmitted to the browser that doesn't show up on the web page itself. Okay, what do I mean by that? So typically, for example, something like the title, oops, I didn't want to do that. Okay. All right. Okay. Typically, what happens is something like the title is shown in the web browser title right here. If you open this up, it'll say Jumbotron example, right? This is the title of the web page. It's not actually on the web page itself. This is all the parts of the web page. So that is metadata that's included. Okay, so all of this information here is about metadata for the browser to make sense out of it. Okay, in particular, for a lot of Bootstrap websites nowadays, these two lines are important. Okay, the viewport information. This basically tells the browser that it is a mobile-first web page. Okay, so if you get out your mobile phone, for example, if you had one or have one available, you could open up this same page on the Twitter site. Okay, for example, right here. Okay, at this page, if you entered it in your Safari browser or your Chrome, okay, on your mobile phone, it would look almost the same. It would look a little bit like this, right? Okay, something like that. Okay, so that you would be able to see it on your mobile phone as well. Okay, all right, I'm gonna scroll down a little bit and see two important lines. Okay, one here, Bootstrap Core CSS, okay, and custom styles for the spreadsheet. Both of these have lines that end in CSS, right? Basically, these are the style sheets that make this page look like what it is, okay? This is really important. These tell you where to find these particular style sheets. So for example, relative to this directory, if I want to find this file, I have to go down to the parent directory, go up to this, go up to CSS, and then find Bootstrap min CSS. So if you go in, again in your file, Windows Explorer or Finder, and you do exactly those commands, all right, you will find yourself able to find this. So I'll show you what that means, okay? So I'm gonna first open up my Finder in Mac. Okay, I'm gonna first find the file that I was showing you. Okay. Okay, we were looking at this file here, index.html. I have to go down one to dist, okay, then go back up one, CSS, and find my minified CSS file. So it's the same as that, okay? So that's where it's loading this information, okay? If you find, for example, when you start working with Bootstrap or any other web project and it's not loading correctly, okay, you should check whether those files are being loaded, okay? Let me show you what it looks like when it doesn't work properly, okay? So we're gonna comment out this line. We do commenting. But let me just remove them. Okay. I'm gonna save that file and I'm gonna reload this. It's gonna look hopefully a little bit different when I use the version that's on my desktop, okay? So this is what this file looks like without all of the CSS put in, okay? This is pretty ugly, I think you all agree with that, but that's what native HTML looks like without any styling. It's vanilla, it's using serif fonts, that means the ones that have the little editings on the letters, okay? And it doesn't make a lot of sense, okay? So what we wanna do is add these two lines to any HTML file that you're going to create, either programmatically using a web framework like Google App Engine or Ruby on Rails, okay? Or manually if you're writing the HTML yourself like we are today, okay? So you need to add these two lines to make this work, okay? When you do that and you reload the page, well, now it looks much better, right, like we did before. Now, if you're using Chrome, you can check this yourself to make sure everything was loaded properly. You can go to View, Developer, and then Developer Tools, okay? Then you'll get this panel on the side. It gets a little complicated, but basically what you're looking for at the bottom here are any errors, okay? So there's one piece of error that requires some attention that we can try to fix. But if you have problems, for example, let's say you spelled this a little bit wrong. Okay, let's just insert a spelling error. Okay, and then we try to reload. You'll see in the developers tool that there's some problem. It says, I couldn't find this file. Okay, it's really hard to read for you, but basically it's saying, you know that CSS page that you asked me to load to help you style the web page? I couldn't find it. Okay, and then you can look at this and say, okay, there's a problem here. I need to fix those red lines before it'll work properly. Okay. So we're going to revert that and run it again, and then it looks fine. Okay, so I'm going to close the developer window. Remember, whenever you're troubleshooting HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, your developer console in your browser is usually quite useful as a tool to diagnose what's wrong. Okay, so there's a similar tool in Firefox, a similar tool in Safari. So it doesn't matter what web browser you're using, as long as you're using it on a desktop. Or a desktop or a laptop. Okay. All right. So now you know about that. You can instantly make any web page look a little bit like this by including those directives. Okay. So basically, what we're saying is we want to include a style sheet based on the minified Bootstrap and custom styles for a particular page. So if you have custom styles for an individual page, you can also include that here, okay? So I have one for Jumbotron CSS, okay? If we scroll farther down, okay, we go down this web page, okay? We go down to the footer, past the footer, okay? You'll see here at the bottom, it's placed some directives for the JavaScript. Okay, we call JavaScript JS, right? So we saw earlier there was a JS directory. Okay, there was the JavaScript that was included. Okay, so in particular, we need to pay attention to these two lines. Okay, so it says script that says there's some piece of programming that I want to load. Okay, either I can do it inline, which means I put the script right here between the ending and open brackets, or I can specify the source. Okay, so I'm not going to include it directly. I'm going to include it via a reference, a hyperlink. Okay, so this says I want to load this particular library. Okay, and we're going to talk about this library in the evening, jQuery. Okay, but basically Bootstrap is a library built on top of another library. Okay, another library called jQuery. Okay, so you're going to need to know all of these things because many times when you're trying to debug something, okay, something doesn't work on, let's say, App Engine. You're saying, okay, well, I've changed something on App Engine. Actually, I think something I did on App Engine was broken. But sometimes it's not the case. You might break something and it's not App Engine's at fault. It could be something farther down. Okay, something like Bootstrap doesn't work, or the library that depends on Bootstrap, jQuery, is not working. Okay, so you need to know where all of the foundations are built up so you understand where the problem lies. Okay, so we need to load jQuery first because, as I said, Bootstrap is built on top of jQuery. Okay, so it calls some functions from jQuery. So if you haven't predefined what jQuery means, it won't make any sense. Just like in Java, if you use something without importing it, it also doesn't make sense to the Java interpreter, right? So that's why we need to load this line first, okay? Then after that, we are going to load this line, which says, get the minified version of Bootstrap, okay? Which is what we've been using, okay? That will enable certain JavaScript dynamic processes to work for us if we're going to use those, okay? So typically when you start a HTML project, okay, if you have web pages that you're going to build, you probably want to insert these lines into every web page that you're creating, okay? So on Ruby on Rails and Google App Engine, there's something called application-wide assets. Okay, so you can look those up. They're going to differ for each framework, but basically what you want is to insert this piece of code into both of these places, okay, such that every web page you're generating is going to use jQuery and use Bootstrap. Okay? If you can also do it individually by loading each individual file and including these, but because they're application wide, typically you put it as application level assets. It's sort of like global variables, if you know what I mean. Okay? Okay, so we place these at the end of the document. Why is that? Because typically we load a web page and we want it to render. We want it to show it to you first. And then because jQuery and JavaScript in general is used to make dynamic effects, okay, we don't actually need to load those in until after the web page is finished. Okay, if we load them in before, what happens is when you load a page, you'll see a blank screen. It will load in all the dynamic effects, still a blank screen, and then you finally load in the HTML and bang, the web page comes up. But because that could take a long time, your user is basically sitting around waiting for things to happen. Okay, wouldn't it be better if you showed the contents of the web page first and then loaded the dynamic effects? Okay, so this is why we put all of these directives at the end. Okay, we want to show the web page to the person first and then allow people to interact with it. Now, sometimes you may have seen, if you're using a web page, you know exactly what to do. As soon as it starts loading, you see the button, you're like, click, and then it doesn't work, right? Because the dynamic effects are not loaded yet. Okay, so typically there's other code on the web page that is sitting there to make sure that nothing starts to happen until everything is loaded in. So you click a button that says, please wait patiently for another couple seconds until everything's ready. Or for example, a button might be grayed out, right? And then when the web page is finished loading, it'll become active. Okay, so we can do all those things with jQuery, but we'll talk about those in the evening, okay? So this is why we typically put these types of calls at the end of a web page, because we want the whole web page to load, and then we want all of the dynamic scripts to be loaded in. Okay, and that's why we also put this line before this line, because this second line depends on the first. All right, all good so far? No problems yet. Okay, now we're going to look at the page itself. All right. So we're going to do this by going through the two parts of the web page by looking at the browser and the command line together. Okay, so this is the page that we saw, right? It has the HTML that you saw on the terminal window. So let's walk you through that. Okay, so first is the section at the top. Okay, this is, as you can expect, the nav bar, right? So if you go back to the Chrome, the nav bar is up here, right? It says project name, home, about, contact. Okay, so that's very nice. We can include this very easily by just creating some markup. Right, these are just HTML tags. There's a nav here, and there are some classes associated with the nav. So there are some things that you can specify here. All of these things here are classes. Right, all of these things here. The first one says it's a nav bar. The second one says it's a nav bar that's at the top and static. So these are like modifiers that help us decide what things to go inside, okay? So for example, if you wanted to change it not to nav bar dark, you wanted a light nav bar, you could take away that, okay, save it, and then when you reload, it'll look a little bit different, right? Now you can see all of these are blue because generally the nav bar is a white bar with blue text in it. Okay, and we have this background inverse over here. That's what makes the nav bar black. We can take those out. Okay, for example, like that. Okay, and then we'll have a normal looking nav bar. Okay, but I think the black one looks better to me. Okay, so I'm going to put those back in. Okay, nav bar. Okay, so I have it like that. Okay, so how do you do this? How do you learn all the different ways that things can work? Well, you go back to Bootstrap's excellent, may I say, excellent documentation. So you can go down here to Bootstrap. Okay, go to documentation. Okay, and you'll be referring to this site a lot when you use Bootstrap. So when you get to the content, for example, okay, it'll tell you the types of things that you can do with it. So actually, I want components, I think. Yeah, nav. Okay. So you click on nav, it'll tell you all of the things that you can do with navigation bars. Okay. So this is how it looks like. Okay. right? So if you go back to our class here, all right, this is how our navbar looks like, right? So you can see actually there's an unordered list, right, with certain list items in it. And you can see what these list items do. They basically tell us the different parts of the web page that we want: home, about, and contact. And outside of the list, I've put one piece of text that has a hyperlink. A is for hyperlink, okay, called project name. Okay, now I'd like you to go right away and switch these around to whatever you want. Okay, you can change the project name to your team name or the project that you're going to build for Orbital. So maybe, for example, I'll call it something else, mission control. Okay, and let's say I'm okay with home, about, and contact. Okay, so I'll keep those there. Okay, I'm going to save that. Then I'm going to refresh the page that I showed you before, and now it says mission control, right? No problem there. Okay, so you can use this to build very nice different types of navbars. This particular navbar scrolls off the page when I scroll down. So there are other things that you can include to make it fixed on the web page. So even if you're scrolling all the way down, you always have the navbar there. That's also a very nice way to do your things. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these, but basically you need to style all of your classes, okay, with the all of the hyperlinks or list items with the classes that you need. Okay, so you can read through the documentation on this. Okay, you can also build tables this way. Okay, so if you want to have tabbed interface, like if you log into Skylab, you'll see tabs. Okay, it was done using Bootstrap. Then you can do something like this. Okay, you can have a tab, and you can have things that are active or not active to show whether things are on or off. Okay, and then the following paragraph or other things you can modify using dynamic HTML that you enable with jQuery. Again, subject for the afternoon workshop, evening workshop. Okay, good so far. So let's go on. Okay, so that was the navbar. Any questions about the navbar? Okay, there's basically lots of things that you can do here. So for example, if you have an item that actually has other items inside of it, you can do that by creating another unordered list inside and putting other items here. Okay. And these, if done properly, should nest. Okay, so you can actually put these as a little wedge sign, a triangle sign, so that you click on this, then the other ones will show. Okay. All right, so we're done with the navbar. Okay, now let's go to the Jumbotron. So again, this is a class that was defined. Right, it's a division that spans the entire web page, and then you can put whatever you want in here. Okay, you can style buttons and other things. Okay, so that's why we have this big page here, right? This big full width version. Okay, so you can use that if you'd like for your web page. You can include a background image or other things like that to make it more stylish. Okay, now the important part is about this part here, these three columns. Okay, so we're going to look at those by changing some information in them. So I want you to go to these row of columns and differentiate their headers. Okay, first, second, third. Okay, I'm going to save that, and then I have three different columns. Okay, and then I'm going to resize the web page. Okay, see what happened after a while, right? Those columns got so narrow that they got stacked on top of each other. Okay, this is the nice thing about responsive web design. You know, they don't want to make it so thin that you have to keep on scrolling to read each column up and down, right? That would be really, really terrible user interface design. Okay, so we enable this by using what Bootstrap has primarily given to you as the most important component. Let's talk about the grid. Okay, so we're going to go to layout in the documentation. Okay, and you're going to learn about the grid system now. Okay, containers are the most basic element layout in Bootstrap, and it's required for using the grid system. Okay, now there are two different types of grids. There's a responsive fixed width container, okay, or fluid width, meaning that 100% all the time. Okay, so what we need to do is whenever we're creating content, we need to put it in this div class container. So this is sort of like the envelope for all the things that you want to be responsive. Okay, so if you go back to this part, you go to the top, you can see right here that there is a div class container, right? Basically, this is the envelope that's going to put all of the things that are going to be resizable, okay? All right, so we have basically a row here, and then some columns. We have 3 columns, first, second, and third, okay? Which all have the class call MD4, okay? So we're going to figure out what that means now. Okay, I'll talk about this in a minute. Hopefully we'll have time to go over that. Okay, grid. Okay, the grid is based on a 12-column layout. Okay, so let's take a look at what that means. Let's see whether we can show an example of that. Okay, here's the grid. Okay, so if this is your entire browser from left to right, we have basically broken up each page into 12 parts. Okay, and depending on how you want your layout in your web page to be, you can define how much space each column in each row takes. Okay, so for example, right now on the example page that you have with you, you have column MD4, column MD4, and column MD4. Okay, so you have 3 columns that take equal width that consume all of the 12 columns in Bootstrap. Okay, now I'd like you to go to this and give different ones. Okay, so for example, I might say MD1, MD2, and MD4. Okay, save that and reload my page. Okay, then it'll look a little bit like this. Right? I have 12 columns. I'm only using 1, 2, and 3, 6 of the 12 columns. That's why it looks like it's taking up half of the web page. Okay, what happens if I put too much? Maybe I put something like 10 here for the first one. Okay, what do you think it's going to do? Why don't you try it and tell me? Okay, everyone able to get this far? Lady, were you able to get the code writing? Okay, great. What's going to happen? Does it work? Oh yeah, it works. I got 10 columns here. The second one was 2, so that's all 12. Right? I used up all I could on that row. And then the third one, which was size 4, got pushed onto the next row. Okay? So it's pretty easy to understand this system. Right? So these are all of MD4. You could do equally all of the examples that they show you here using the code that they have here. So these are all 12 rows of 12 columns of size 1, 1 column of size 8 and 4. This is the one we were using of 3 or 4, and 2 where you split it into 2 nicely divided pages. Okay? So maybe you want something else. You could change it around so that it works nicer in mobile and desktop if you still want to have 2 things next to each other instead of them getting stacked, because you want your user to see both of the headers at the top rather than, you know, relegating one too far down. Okay, then you would have to play around with these other modifiers. Okay, so let's talk about these modifiers here. There's an MD here, right? All of these are MD. That's the default medium size. Okay, so we're going to talk about that now. Let's go up to grid. Okay, so these are the different things that we are talking about. Okay, so it depends on what type of device you're formatting your web page for by default. Okay, by default, when you create a website, you're aiming for something that has at least 768 pixels wide. Okay, more like a desktop or a tablet. Okay, rather than a phone. If you're typically thinking that your website users will be phone users, then you can aim for something like extra small or small. Okay, then you would change these to small or extra small. Okay, then you would get a grid that would work well on a mobile or small device. Okay? So you can see this in action again. Basically, right now, when you have, sorry, let's go back down to the top. Okay, we've talked about the responsiveness, right? So there are what they call media breakpoints. Okay, these are the places where you see the website, popping into a different dimension, right? So for example, right now we're on the large dimension or extra large dimension. When we change it down a little bit, you see it just popped there, right? Okay, that is when it hits a media breakpoint, meaning the device or the browser has changed to a certain dimension. It's going to reformat everything. Okay, now there are sometimes other ways that you can do it. Like if you look at a standard web page, it'll just like do this continuously rather than popping. Okay, so the reason why they do the popping is because they want it to fit exactly certain widths for devices. Okay, all right, so that's all in good. So we figured out a little bit about the grid system. So you can change these to whatever you like. Okay, so maybe I want, let's say 5 and 7 for the second row. And then if you look at the original version, you can see they'll nest nicely like that. Okay. So go ahead and add some text, whatever you want in these parts. Okay, there's some placeholder text here, and then we can go on from there. All right. So I'll go ahead and go through a couple more things. Okay, so that's the grid. That's the primary reason why we use Bootstrap, is to get this responsive layout. But it also includes a lot of nice features that are very useful to know about. Okay, so in particular, there's things that you can do to image tables and other things that are quite nice. So let's look at tables first. Okay, so tables, you can just add some basic examples. So I want you to take this text, so you go to Content Tables in the version for Bootstrap. Okay, you scroll down to the basic table, and you're going to copy this information and put it into one of your columns. Okay, so you can do that by using this handy copy part here. So you copy that, it'll copy that to your clipboard, right? Then we're going to go to our web page editor, okay, and we're going to paste it in here. So I'm going to just get some space and then paste in the table. All right, and maybe I want to format it well or indent it well, then I can, tabify it so it looks nice. Okay, and then I'm going to save it. Okay, so then what we are going to have is a table, right? Just like in the original version. Okay, so you can edit this to be whatever you want. Okay, but the important thing here is that we can go and style it very easily. Okay, so if I want to have a black web page, I don't have to fiddle with the CSS and everything. Twitter Bootstrap has already done a lot of that for me. I can just add this table inverse to the header of that table. You see there's a class here. So we're just going to change inside the class, we're going to add table inverse to it. Okay, so we're going to go back up. Okay, and it says table class here. I'm just going to insert another class here, table inverse, right? Save it, and then when I reload, it'll be inverted. Okay, so basically what you want to do is when you're designing your website, you can look at all of the styles for tables. Okay, so let's say we go through here, and we say, oh, I don't need a table head. I don't need to worry about that. But I would like, for example, a stripe table. That looks pretty good, right? I mean, in a lot of data analytics, you always see these stripe tables. So how do we do that? We need to do that by adding it to the class, or I could add it to a specific table row by adding it within the table body. Okay, but I'm going to add it to the class instead. Okay, so I'm going to do that by table striped. Okay. You could also have both, right? Table inverse and table stripe. That may not look very good, but we'll take a look. See, so you would have something like that. Okay. Okay. Everyone following? Anyone not here yet? It's okay. We can revise it again later. No problems, right? Okay. So I hope you know what a table is. Basically, there are a couple components to the table, right? There's a header, which is this part here, right? That's just telling you the markup for the header of the table, consisting of a row with certain table head cells, okay? Okay, and a table body, which contains the data of the table, right? Okay, you can also add a caption if you want. So you could say, for example, down here, add a caption. Hello world. Okay, and there you go. You can see the caption down here. Right, so those are tables. Tables are very often used for a lot of different purposes. Previously, the table tag was used for placing different things in different parts of the web page. But with HTML5, now we're using the division tag to do that. So if you see a lot of division tags, it's basically used for layout, putting things on different parts. Now, table tags are actually for presenting tabular data. Okay, great. So let's go on from there. Let's do some images. Okay. So images are nice and fun because they can be responsive, okay? So it's actually very easy to do. You basically have an image tag, and then make it responsive by including the class image fluid. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna add an image, but let's do it to another column because it's more fun. Okay, so we'll pick the first column, get rid of the text, okay, get rid of the button. I'm gonna add an image here. Okay, so I'm gonna copy that, put an image, okay. Then I have to specify an image, right? I have to get an image from somewhere. Luckily, for you, I've already included some images in the same directory. So you can choose any one of these. Let's say basket 400 by 300 PNG. I'm gonna copy that file name and then put it here. Okay, and then hopefully this will work. So I'm gonna go back to my example, and there we go. We have an image, right? And because it's responsive, hopefully it will resize properly. See, there it goes. You can see it actually got bigger and smaller when we did that. Because we added that tag for image fluid, this one right here, right? Because it says if the image is too big, it doesn't fit the browser screen, resize it appropriately, right? Let's turn this off for a second and see what would happen otherwise, okay? Now you can see the image doesn't resize and it gets scroll. You get this awful horizontal scroll bar, which doesn't make sense on any desktop browser, right? We do this a lot on mobile devices because we swipe left and right. But on a desktop, usually you hate to scroll sideways, right? So this is why we have this, they designed Bootstrap this way. Okay, so I'm gonna put that back in because obviously I want the image to be fluid, okay? Okay, great. All right, so we can do some other things with this. Okay, so we could do image shapes. This is also quite fun, right? So you can change the look of an image instead of having it, that boxy shape. You want it rounded, or you want to have corners with it, or you want it to have a frame. Then you just add these classes, right? So that's quite easy to do. Let's do that. Okay, I'm going to pick up my basket image. I'm going to clone it 3 times. And this, I'm just going to change the image class here, okay? I'm just going to copy what was on there, image rounded. Okay, image circle. And image thumbnail. Okay, save it. And then see what comes out on the other side, right? Oh, there we go. See, isn't that nice? So you can style your images very quickly. You don't have to work very hard for this because they've already done all the work for you. Okay, actually, it's quite a lot of code to write, but once you've written it, you never have to remember it, right? That's the whole point of abstraction. Okay. So I'm free of all of those. This is a 10 length column, so if I want to pop the other ones back up, maybe I'll change it to like 4. Okay. So now I can get the other things here. All right. Okay. Let's do one other thing before we finish this part of tutorial. Okay, and that is to look at another really new thing that people are doing with Bootstrap, which is a component that's new to Bootstrap 4, which you are all getting a preview. All of the other developers out there that are using Bootstrap 3, they don't know how to do this yet, okay, is to use cards. Okay, so I think you've seen cards before, right? Cards look like those things that you see in Pinterest. Anyone seen Pinterest before? Okay, they look like these types of things here, right? In fact, you can do some really nice styling of them, like, let's see, where is it? A masonry-like effect, okay, like this, right? Where you can stack cards next to each other, make them look nice, okay? So let's say you have a lot of these content that your users are generating. They're using CRUD to put up items for sale or properties for listings or module reviews for your review. You want to put them in this nice layout. Okay, this looks really complicated to design, and it is, but Bootstrap makes it easy. You just put each of these cards next to each other, and the Bootstrap system will lay them out appropriately for you. So we're going to do that. Okay, we're going to do this by using this type of code here. Okay, so we're going to do like all developers do and just plagiarize by typing copy here. Okay, copy the clipboard. I got it all. All right, and we're going to make a new row. Okay, because it's nicer in a new row. So this is we're going to create a new row in this. Okay, this is the finish for the container. So we don't want to play around with that. We want another row. So we're going to create a div class row. Okay, and we're going to close it. And then we're going to create a column, right? Div class. I'm going to use the full width for this. Okay, column MD12. Okay, close that. Okay, once you've written that, you can go cut and paste what we just dumped in. Okay, I dumped it in. I didn't even format it. I'm going to reload. Okay. Oh, look at that. Isn't that nice? Okay. So let's go over what this cards look like on the HTML side. Okay. So you understand what's going on. So I'm going to go back to the top of this section that we just cut and pasted. Maybe we'll do it in the browser because it looks nicer there. Where is it? Okay, here. All right, so this is the thing that we just cut and paste. This is what we're looking at. So basically, within that column of 12, medium point, I added this entire block, right? So I said div card columns. This is what gives this nice Pinterest-like feel. If you don't want that, you want another version of that, you can choose something that's more aligned. So you can pick this grid, which makes all of the cards the same height. Right, so this card is a bit short, but it got lengthened, so it's nice, this nice block layout. Okay, but let's imagine that we want this what they call masonry-like, like bricks, like feel. Then what we're going to do is look at the HTML. All right, so we just use the class, this envelope class called card columns for this division, and we're going to specify a number of cards. Right, all of these are different cards that we can put in. Okay, we just put them in the order that we want. Okay, and then Bootstrap is going to lay them out the way that it would like it to do it. Okay, so that's the outermost tag. Now let's take a look at the cards themselves to see what's going on. Okay, you can also group cards into something like this if you'd like. Okay. Okay, but let's go back to the top. Okay. So here's the card, right? A card looks like this, right? There's an image at the top. If you choose to use one, you specify that using an image class, okay? So if you don't use this class that says card image top, what will happen is this image won't look appropriate for the card. So you have to add that class in to the content to make it look nice, okay? Then you can have wherever the source image is coming from. So usually you won't use the data prefix, you just use source, okay? The data source is for when you're using Ajax, which I'll talk about in the afternoon, or the evening, okay? So you can put a source here. And so for example, I'm gonna put a source image, okay? Let me get rid of that. And I'm gonna take a look at the other images that I have. Maybe I want the motorcycle image. So I'm gonna copy that. And I'm gonna put it here. Okay, so now I have an image of a motorcycle. And we're gonna see whether that works well. All right, so there we go. I have an image for the motorcycle, right? And then you can see what goes on here. I have a header of size 4. That's the card title. Again, this is to just make it look nice on that if you didn't have that class. And the paragraph tag. Okay, so that makes this particular card here, right? An H4 header, right? And a paragraph tag. Okay. And I have a blue colored card here. That's also very easy to do. Again, if you look at the documentation for that. We're going to scroll down to coloring. Okay, and so you can just change the background color or border color of a card, right? So you can see here, for example, there's one of them here that's changed here, right? By adding a color modifier. Color warning is yellow, color card danger would be red. Okay, so I could modify that particular one too. Right, I could say color danger, and then come back here, and I'll get a red card. Okay. So Bootstrap is a really, really effective JavaScript framework to start dealing with. Practically all of the web frameworks, including Ruby on Rails, Google App Engine, Python using Flask or the Django, all can use Bootstrap too. So it's a pretty much fundamental technology that almost every web developer will know. Okay. All right. So that pretty much concludes the tutorial that I've asked you to look at. What I'd like you to do is try a couple things here. So I'll go over some of these with you. All right. So we've talked about what responsive web design is, right? Basically that a web page looks tolerable, maybe not designed specifically, but on several different device widths. Okay. Mix-ins are what we've been using together, right? They're basically allowing different types of rules to CSS to play nicely with different types of objects. We've talked about minification. Minification is the process of removing spaces and changing the identifiers to be shorter so that they load faster. Less and a couple of other terms that you'll hear are ways of making the CSS nice. Okay, by making it something that can be compiled. Less is a framework used in Bootstrap 3. Bootstrap 4, which we're using today, doesn't use less anymore. Okay, so you don't have to worry about this, but it's, again, some of the acronyms you should know. Oh, less means something to do with CSS. Okay, so you can look nice when you go interview for that next internship. Okay. Okay, media query, all right. This is something very important for responsive web design. Okay, this means that the web page is basically asking, what type of resolution do you support? What type of functionality do you support? Okay, very important, because for example, on a mobile phone, there's the action that you can do of swiping, right? You can't really do this, right? I mean, unless you're trying to clean your monitor. Right? But it doesn't work, right? Unless you have a touch screen. So you need to know what type of device is supported, and so that your web page can act accordingly. So media queries are a way which the page is asking the device, what do you support? And for Bootstrap, mostly that's telling me what resolution are you at, so I can show you the web page nicely. Okay, whether I show you that hamburger menu, which is very typical, right? So if you resize this menu, you get this hamburger menu up here, right? That's what they call it. Okay, that's also another functionality in Bootstrap that you can use when you look at the navigation section, which we just briefly touched on. Okay, if you do it correctly, you get this hamburger menu for free. Okay, and then basically you get this nice, well, it'll be a little bit different than the sidebar, but it'll be a drop down that you can get. Okay. Okay. So what I want you to do between now and the afternoon, if you choose to do this homework assignment, okay, is to build a sample web page for your project. Basically, we've taught you some of the components already. Now, with your partner, go build something nicer, okay? Go source for images, find nice text that you want to write, build a sample web page for your project. Okay, and then later on you can roll that into whichever web framework if you're doing a web project. If you're not doing a web project, never mind. It's still good to know Bootstrap and how to create web pages for yourself. How many of you have a personal homepage? Okay, so now this is the time to do it, okay? Create one, all right? Make a Git repository for it, okay? So that you can upload it to Git. And then when you create your own directory in SOC, then you can have your own web page within SOC too. I'll give you instructions for how to make your web page within SOC, maybe later through another webcast, or you can ask me while we're here. Okay, it's actually fairly easy to do. Okay, so then you can have something that looks a little bit like a web page too, like I have one. This one is also based on Bootstrap. It also uses the same type of things at the top. It also resizes. You see it's got the hamburger menu here, etc. This is all done with the Jumbotron. This is a Jumbotron up here, right? And I have the columns that are over here, okay? So same thing. All right, aside from that, what you can try to do is do some of the other homework assignments. So right now, we have the example project uses a fixed nav, but it scrolls off the page, right? So if you go down here and you scroll, you can see this nav bar is gone, right? It moved off. So we would like to have it fixed on the page so that even if you scroll down, it doesn't disappear. Right? So you can do that very easily, but I'd like you to discover it for yourself. Okay, basically all you have to do is go to Bootstrap again and go back to the top. Okay, and then go to the part which talks about nav bars. Okay, and then you can figure out here how to get it so that it is placed correctly, so it doesn't go around all over the place. Okay, fixed top. Okay, and have it collapsible so it shows you this type of hamburger menu. Okay, that's one homework I'd like you to think about doing. The other one is to add a working carousel component. Do you know what an image carousel is? Okay, it's basically one of those things that you'll see on this, not Carousel, our local startup, but Carousel Bootstrap. Okay, so you can see an example of that. Right, so it's this type of thing here where you can just go around with different images, right? So this is also very, very easy to do in Bootstrap once you've included all of the JavaScript correctly. So I'd like you to cut and paste this, add it into whichever part of the page you want and show that you have it working, okay? Then you can try it for yourself, okay? So those are your homework assignments if you choose to do so for this one. And then later in the evening, we'll go over jQuery, which will show you how this was built, right? The fundamentals to why Bootstrap was put together from here, okay? Any quick questions before we end this session? Were you guys able to follow around? Yes? Yes, it will be here. If you are staying around for the evening web session, we will give you food. Okay, so that's an enticement for you to be back here at 7 o'clock. Okay, the food will come at 6. So I need to know roughly a show of hands again. How many of you are thinking of staying for the evening workshop? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so those of you who are staying, just stay on for a second. I'm going to get your flavor preferences for pizza so we can order it according to your liking, especially if you're a vegetarian. We will certainly cater for that. Okay, so thanks very much, and I hope to see you in the evening, and also for Mission Control 2, especially if you're thinking of developing games or you'd like to try your hand at doing it. The games development group will be coming for the second one. It'll be over at a different venue in Plugin at Block 71. So you actually have to go outside of NUS to get there. Okay, thanks a lot and see you soon. How do you make it dark color? Okay.